The observation deck of the Meridian Ark hummed with the soft vibration of ion drives, a lullaby that most species found unsettling. But Darren had grown accustomed to it during his 3 years aboard the interstellar refuge ship. What he hadn't grown accustomed to, what still filled him with quiet wonder, was the weight of Vecca curled against his chest. The cub's breathing came in small, whistling huffs through triple nostrils. Her obsidian claws retracted into velvet paws that kneaded occasionally against his sternum. 2 other cubs, Vecca's siblings, lay sprawled across his legs and stomach, their combined mass easily exceeding his own body weight. Any sudden movement could prove fatal. Their species, the Kareen, were apex predators whose adults stood 3 meters tall and could shear through titanium plating with their jaws. Yet here lay their young, completely vulnerable, completely trusting, sleeping on a human's chest status. The whisper came from Commander Thexelar, whose 4 eyes never left Darren's prone form. The Valorian officer stood at attention just beyond the reinforced glass partition, his mandibles clicking with barely suppressed anxiety. "All stable," replied Dr. Saria, checking her medical scanner for the 14th time in as many minutes. Heart rate elevated but manageable. The cubs show deep REM cycle activity. Moving them now would be inadvisable. Inadvisable, Thexelar repeated, his primary eyes swiveling to observe the ring of Kareen adults surrounding the observation deck's exterior. 12 fully grown predators, each capable of decimating a battalion, sat in perfect stillness. Their silver eyes tracked every breath Darren took, every micro-expression that crossed his face. This is madness, but it wasn't madness. It was necessity. 6 weeks ago, the Kareen had boarded the Meridian Ark as refugees, fleeing the glassing of their homeworld by the Sovereignty Collective. They arrived traumatized, aggressive, their social structures shattered. The cubs, separated from their parents during the evacuation, refused to eat, refused to sleep, their distress calls echoing through the ship's corridors in frequencies that made even hardened soldiers weep. Every species aboard had tried to help. The Valorians with their advanced psychiatric protocols, the Ixthari with their empathic harmonics, the Gren with their chemical pacifiers. Nothing worked. The cubs were dying, and with them the last hope of the Kareen species. Then Darren had volunteered. Humans raised persistence hunters, he'd explained simply to the council. Our ancestors tracked prey for days, not through speed or strength, but through endurance and patience. We also carried our young constantly. We're wired for prolonged contact, for reading subtle emotional cues. Let me try, they'd thought him insane. The Kareen adults had been skeptical at best, hostile at worst. But desperation made allies of enemies. Darren had started small, sitting near the cubs' enclosure, speaking softly, making no sudden movements. He'd learned their body language, the difference between a fear display and a play invitation. He'd brought them food soaked in his scent. He'd hummed the old lullabies his grandmother once sang, letting the vibrations carry through the air. It took 11 days before Vecca approached him. She'd been the smallest, the weakest, her survival the most uncertain. She'd pressed her muzzle against his palm, inhaling deeply, her body trembling. Then she'd climbed into his lap, circled twice, and collapsed against him with a sound somewhere between a purr and a sob. The Kareen adults had gone perfectly still. Now, 3 weeks later, this had become routine. Every sleep cycle, the cubs sought out Darren. They'd pile onto him in the observation deck, chosen for its transparency so the adults could watch, and sleep for hours. And Darren would remain motionless, his back aching, his legs going numb, his chest compressed under their combined weight. He never complained. He never called for relief. Vecca stirred, a small whimper escaping her throat. Immediately, every adult Kareen tensed, their hackles rising. Darren felt the shift in atmosphere, the predatory readiness that could explode into violence in a heartbeat. He began to hum, low and steady, the same melody he'd used since that first day. His hand moved slowly, so slowly, to rest gently on Vecca's head, his fingers scratching behind the ridge where her ears would develop. The cub sighed and settled deeper against him. The adults relaxed, millimeter by millimeter. 4 hours, Dr. Saria whispered, awe coloring her voice. He's been lying there for 4 hours without moving. Human endurance, Thexelar murmured, his earlier skepticism replaced with something approaching reverence. The stories are true, but it wasn't just endurance. Darren knew that even if the others didn't fully understand, it was the willingness to be vulnerable, to put himself completely at the mercy of creatures that could kill him without effort. It was trust offered freely with no guarantee of reciprocation. That was the human gift. Not strength or technology, but the ability to see past fangs and claws to the frightened children beneath. The capacity to love the seemingly unlovable, to protect the perceived threat, to bridge the unbridgeable. One of the adult Kareen, matriarch Shalrix, Veka's mother, approached the glass. Her massive form should have been terrifying, but Darren met her silver gaze steadily. She placed one enormous paw against the transparent barrier. Darren smiled and nodded slightly, careful not to disturb the sleeping cubs. The matriarch's ears flicked forward in what he'd learned was a Kareen expression of gratitude. Then she settled onto her haunches, joining the vigil. They would watch over him as he watched over their young, an apex predator species guarding a human who guarded their cubs. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. How much longer? Thexler asked. Dr. Saria checked her scanner. At least another hour until they naturally wake. Darren heard the exchange but didn't react. Another hour. He could manage another hour. He'd manage as long as it took because that's what humans did. They endured. They persisted. They cared. Veka's small paw flexed against his chest, claws pricking through his shirt but not breaking skin. She was dreaming, chasing phantoms through forests that no longer existed on worlds that were now ash. But she was alive. They all were. And Darren would lie here, still as stone, for however long they needed. The predator cubs slept on, secure in the knowledge that the strange, soft human would keep them safe. And around them, warriors of a dozen species watched and wondered at the quiet courage of humanity. Not the courage of battle, but the courage of compassion. The bravery not to conquer but to comfort. That perhaps was the most powerful force in the galaxy.